Okay, so we're still talking about our timeline of life, and we're still here in the Paleozoic era, but today we're going to talk about the Carboniferous period. The Carboniferous period lasted from 360 million years ago to 300 million years ago. And actually it is subdivided into two epochs, the Mississippian period and the Pennsylvanian period, which I think is very confusing that they call it the Mississippian period and the Pennsylvanian period when they're actually epochs, and the Carboniferous is the period. But there you go, that's what it's called. I didn't make the names. So the Carboniferous period, it started when there was a mass extinction here at the very end of the Devonian period. This mass extinction, it caused the loss of a whole lot of ocean organisms. Now, we talked in Devonian about how that was kind of the age of fish, and there were so many new fish. Well, a lot of those fish went extinct at the end of the Devonian before the Carboniferous period started. And what happened is a lot of animals moved to land. At the very end of the Devonian period, there were amphibians, which we'll talk more about in a minute, and that kind of marked the Carboniferous period. At the beginning of this period also, there were a lot of great disturbances in the earth. As tectonic plates, those are those plates that make up our continents, smashed together. They collided. In Europe, there was a big buildup of mountains, especially in Scotland and Scandinavian countries. And one that we can still see today is the Ural Mountains. This is one of the oldest mountain ranges in the world. It's not the oldest. Appalachians are older than that. But these were formed at that time. Plants, so we've moved to a lot of land forms of life. Plants generally adapted very well to land existence. They multiplied rapidly, and you can see here all the different kinds of plants that we have in the Carboniferous period. They grew taller and taller over the millennia in strong competition for sunlight. We know that plants need sunlight to eat, right? Woody plants evolved into trees with thousands of leaves and strong trunks. So here's an early woody plant, tree, called the Lepidod. I did practice this, but boy, am I just messing it up. Lepidodendron. Hard to read them upside down. Another example towards the end here is called the Chorditalis. These guys actually were like some of the tallest trees. They got to be up to 100 feet tall. That is a darn big tree. And that's that competition for sunlight. The drying up of lakes and rivers affected animal life as well. And we're going to go back just a little bit till the very end of the Devonian period. The fish population multiplied, their living space diminished, and the water became more stagnant. So many fish developed lungs to supplement their oxygen intake. And in fact, fish today have what's called a swim bladder. That actually, it helps maintain their balance, but that comes from this development of lungs that happened at the very end of the Devonian and through the Carboniferous period. Other fish, in addition to developing lungs to continue to receive sufficient oxygen, developed lobe fins to walk across land from one area of water to a nearby area of water. One type is the Eusthenopteron. Here it is, Eusthenopteron. The Eusthenopteron had all the characteristics that we would expect to find in the ancestors of four-legged land animals. And in fact, they are some of the earliest ancestors of four-legged land animals. They had internal nostrils inside their noses, not gills. They had similar skull structure. They had powerful muscles in their two sets of paired fins here. One early amphibian that developed out of this is the Akanthostega. Can you put that down there for me? The environment that this amphibian and other early amphibians found was somewhat of a problem to them. There was a very real danger of the animals drying out because, of course, they came from water, right? But they had to remain near water because of that. Their skin wouldn't retain body water like our skin does to allow for life functions. Amphibians also face this problem with their eggs. Their eggs couldn't retain enough water, and so their eggs had to be laid in water for them to survive. So their eggs were jelly-like and could not be laid on land because they'd lose all their moisture. And out of this, because of that problem, one thing that developed was the very first lizards, which appear here in the Carboniferous period. But the Carboniferous period is really known as the Age of Amphibians. So I want to look at just a couple other types of amphibians. The Ariops was a type of amphibian that was actually among the largest land animals of their times. They were from 5 feet to 9 feet long. That is quite a large amphibian. And the Pederpis was an early amphibian that had 5 toes on its limbs. It grew to about 1 meter long, so not quite as long, and it had a mix of terrestrial and aquatic features, like many amphibians. So lots of new amphibians in this time. Also developing more in this time were arthropods. They were among the first pioneers to develop land-suited forms. So millipedes, this is a giant millipede called the Arthropleura. I think I covered it with this guy. Here he goes. Isopods, you guys might know these now as pill bugs or roly-polies. And silverfish, which also still exist today. All these animals, not this exact form of millipede, but all of these animals exist today still. They found a way to change their gills to lungs and breathe air. And some mollusks, which had been only aquatic, also developed the ability to live on land. For example, snails that we have today developed in the Carboniferous period. So that's a whole lot of life that came into being during the Carboniferous period. The climate in this period was damp and subtropical over most of the globe. It was extremely humid with massive clouds maintaining kind of a greenhouse atmosphere, and that allowed these giant plants and forests to grow. So many plants flourished so well that, all living things die, so there was an abundance of dead plants that got crowded out. These dead plants turned into sediments and deposits, and they were crushed by more dead plants and crushed by more dead plants and so on until they were actually crushed under the Earth's surface. And over millions of years, all of these dead plants turned into coal and oil. Now, coal and oil are forms of carbon, and that is where we get the term for this period, the Carboniferous period. All right, next we'll talk about the Permian period.